going back to work? Or are you going to start working from home? Or are you doing both? A few days here and a few days there. And how are you feeling just thinking about that? I know it's been such a change in our environment, and our behavior and our thinking and our feeling, all those things coming together. How are you managing all that? Well, today, as my amazing feng shui expert guest, we have Candice who's with us. Hello, Candice. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing today?
Very, very good. It's always so good. We started, following and knowing each other between Clubhouse and Instagram, and it's just been an amazing journey, meeting so many amazing people who love the Feng Shui and really are here to help people feel so much better in our environment. And I thought today we could have a bit of a chat about that kind of hybrid things. But first of all, please, Candice, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into Feng Shui in the first place?
Actually, my desire for feng shui, I think, just like a lot of people that come to maybe looking at an alternative to solve a problem they have in life, I think that's kind of how a lot of people discover feng shui, and that's how I discovered feng shui. But I was having really actually relationship issues, and my husband was the one that suggested. He was like, "Have you ever heard of feng shui?" And I had, but I think just had kind of a very general view. I didn't know anything about it. And when I went to hire a consultant, there was none in my area. And so we ended up having she became my mentor later on, but we hired her to come and look at our home, but we flew her in from Utah because there was nobody really in Texas we could
Wow.
find. So she actually offered, hey, I have a, feng shui certification program, and, offered for me to go take the program. And I was just it was so profound to me and so interesting to me. And but even just from her consultations, I think a lot of people feel that way. You get a consultation, but you want to know more. And I was just so invested in knowing more that I dove in,
Yes,
and here I
yes.
am. Yeah.
I think you do. You get intrigued, aren't you? And I used when I first discovered it, and I've been trying to kind of put it into a business environment, and never felt right because I always felt Feng Shui was just a bit too woo woo, and people would think, "What is Claire doing now?" So I've been talking about it under environment psychology. And actually just talking a little bit about it but really never come out with it. And now that I've really decided to kind of come out with it, I really want to call it Feng Shui because that's the words actually who get people ticking. Hmm, what's this? They get intrigued by it. Oh, I may have heard about it. I want to know more. And that's the kind of that's that intrigue of it, isn't it? That get people wanted to know more about it.
For sure. When I first started and I was trying to explain to people, I was like, kind of shy about explaining it. How do I explain it? Are people going to think it's weird? And it was actually probably what my mentor, so the lady I ended up taking this feng shui certification, my feng shui consultant, her name's Tina Falk, and she actually has a virtual school too, if anyone's interested.
Yeah.
But it's called Via Feng Shui. But when we were in class, one thing she said was that, just own it. And it really does open up a conversation. And that really inspired me, I think, to just be really open about it.
Yes.
And I think it just gives people a chance to understand it. And you get to explain it more. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think again, it won't be for everybody, but this is okay. And I think that's one of the things as well as a consultant, you always want to try to help everybody. And if somebody, doesn't get it, you're really, really trying. And actually being okay with somebody not wanting to know more, it's okay as well, isn't it? It's like, you know what? Here's some information, take it, do whatever you want with it. And if one day you want to know more, you know where I am. And that's a big step as well when you start as a consultant, isn't it? Just to be able to be, to be okay with the people that want to come to you and want to know more.
Yes,
Yes.
for sure.
So you're based in Texas.
I am, yes. So I'm in West Texas. It's closer to New Mexico border, so I'm kind of like Northwest Texas. So I'm way up in what they call the Panhandle.
Right.
Yeah.
Why is that
Uh-huh.
then? Why is that called a panhandle?
It is flat cotton fields. It's literally just the panhandle of Texas. I joke that, feng shui, of course, it, translates to wind and water. We have no mountains, we have no water. It's just the flat plains, and we have a lot of cotton fields and a lot of agriculture. So it's perfect flat land for that.
Oh,
But
brilliant.
yeah, it's just literally the plains of
Yeah.
Texas.
A lot of yin earth then, isn't it? Because again,
Yes.
a lot of that yin and yang, there's always, when we talk about the five elements, there's always a yin and a yang of each of the
Mhm.
elements, which is really interesting when you really get to the nitty gritty into it. Right, let's stop talking now. Let's get into the business, right? And so yes, I think there's a big kind of shift now, and people have seen that working from home is working, but they still want their people back. And some people feel, I think there's going to be a lot of emotions going through people who've actually adapted so well working from home, having to emotionally having to go back into that workplace. Do you think that's going to be, uh, how can the Feng Shui help with the emotionals that people live?
I mean, I do think having a good feng shui setup definitely helps you feel better.
Yeah.
That's one of the way I think I explain feng shui so for example, I went and did a talk at my daughter's school to some fourth graders, a couple years ago. And, I was like, how am I going to explain feng shui to kids? And how I explained to them is, have you ever moved your furniture and your room felt different? And
Mm.
so it really can change the way your space feels and really support you also emotionally, help lend that support in the way your space feels.
Mm. And so when you're obviously at work, I think a lot of people now kind of adapted and got to, at home, got to a place where they kind of started to get some kind of routine or,
Hmm.
that kind of things. And now they've been
Yeah.
asked to start going back into the workplace and having that kind of hybrid, a few days here and a few days there. What kind of suggestion would you offer when you're kind of going back into your workplace? What are the kind of things that you need to think about going back into really kind of that corporate environment or office environment to help you feeling as if you were at home? Because it's different, isn't it? That corporate environment, it's really not a home. So how can you make that environment more a homely feeling?
That's a really good question. I think one thing I would probably implement is a lot of pictures that you can look at throughout the day. I think we've all got used to having our children at home. My kids actually went back to school at the beginning of the year, at the school year, because Texas, has been pretty open about some of their policies. And so, they were ready to go back. But I think, I really did miss my kids, and just having some pictures accessible for you that have your children in them, maybe some things you did while you were home, maybe some souvenirs from your kids, like just some things that make you feel still connected to them while you're at work. I think is a really good idea. Maybe
Mhm.
some little homemade crafts you did or something you did together when
Mhm.
during this time you were together.
Yeah, and it's something you can take with you, isn't it, as well? It's
Hmm.
something that you can carry. I think a lot of people are going to be starting doing hot desking, so
Hmm.
not having a desk themselves, and that's another kind of um, interesting way to actually, how can you create a little mini space to yourself when you're doing those kind of things? There's a lot of people who've been working in co spaces, isn't it? And so is there anything that, obviously you talked about the photos, anything else that you could suggest would be a great thing that people think about or bring
Yeah,
with?
I have heard other practitioners say, you can literally take that Bhagavata. I know you do BTB. And so, I mean, you could literally just look at the Bhagavata, orient it to how your space is and kind of follow the setup within your desk,
Mhm,
and kind of think of it that way. So
mhm.
I would suggest that if that's, something you implement, you could put your picture of your children, in on that middle, right of your desk. And,
Mhm.
so there's definitely things you could do to, I think, bring that with you. And it would be easy to break down at the end of a day. You don't have to, have to leave it set up.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of because there's obviously different schools of Feng Shui, and what school do you follow, or what's the interpretation of Feng Shui? Because I think it's really all about that interpretation of it, isn't it?
hmm Yes, it is. See, when people start out, I think because I started out and I started looking at a lot of information online. I was really confused, and that's one reason we hired a feng shui consultant because I think, I was like, well, it says here you can put flowers here, but this says you can't put flowers here, and so actually I practice classical feng shui, and as a feng shui consultant, it's more about the way you orient yourself in a space,
Mhm.
as opposed to what you're putting in it. But I do like feng shui inspired design and feng shui inspired setup and placement of your desk and everything because I think it helps create that visual reminder for you.
Mhm.
This is, this represents, the career, this represents, my family, or this represents, this creative part of me. And so I definitely think that it helps serve as a visual reminder. But with classical feng shui, really, it's more of the way you're oriented literally within a space, and the direction, the literal compass direction that you're facing
Mhm. Yeah.
and sitting in.
Very good. So you do
Yeah.
have, you talk about career area, a career of the Bagua, that career space. If we're talking, kind of business kind of feng shui, more like it, what are the kind of things, where would be that area, and what are the kind of cures or things that people could add on to make sure that, they have the best, career they could do, and they could really kind of trigger that new job, or what are the things that they could be doing in that area to improve their career?
With classical feng shui, also it's a lot about troubleshooting, and I do a lot of that. I know on Clubhouse, I think last week we talked a little bit about the Chinese astrology, and so what I do as a classical consultant is I'll take literally your personal energy. I'll look at it and I'll tell you, okay, it really depends. Like, say you do need a promotion, well, are you qualified to get the promotion? Do you need to study something? And if so, we could look at an area that associates with maybe intelligence. So you could study for your test, or you could study for your certification, excuse me. I feel like I need a drink of water. I took off without my water. Or, if it's something like, maybe if it's a matter of politics, and within the office, and you, need help from another, like your supervisor or something like that, you would look at, what your nobleman is, and you would use the area associated with your nobleman, or you could even activate that in certain ways within either your home or your office to trigger that energy. And so that's kind of how I work as a classical consultant. We don't work so much as far as putting up items and stuff like that, but it's more about using and combining the personal energy with the energy that's supportive to you in the space.
Hmm. So
So
you
it's
do,
it's and it's
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's with classical feng shui, it's very personalized, and so it's hard to say a general way to use it. But that is when I do tell people, if you do need that visual reminder to implement like some of the BTB things, or some of those things that remind you, okay, I've activated this area to, have somebody come in and help me, or to help with my career. And then let's, maybe place something out that reminds me and sets that intention too.
I see. Yes, because you also work with, well, you calculate their numbers, don't you? So you kind of calculate that with their date of birth, and how does that relate with their home, and how does that relate, so for each of the months as well. So that's kind of a lot of calculation with the classical, isn't it?
Yes, I'm so grateful for software because it's actually all done with software. So yeah, you actually, most people know they have an animal sign they're born under, but you actually have four animal signs you're born under. One for the year, one for the month, one for the day, and one for the hour. And actually, the month you're born and the year you're born kind of relate. Well, really, the year you're born relates more to your social life and the social aspect of it. And so that can kind of, translate into career if you're trying to network.
Mhm.
And the month you're born it relates more to your career and kind of the way you operate. And so I would look at things like that and be able to give suggestions that way.
It's very interesting. I think for me it was
Yeah.
always been too complicated, but I guess yes, now with the software, you can do a lot more in that and that understanding. But it's also I use the 9 star key, and so each year there's 9 years as a cycle,
Hmm.
and being able to kind of realize which year you're in, but then you can do each month that you're in as well. So it's a similar thing, isn't it? When you
Hmm.
actually know auspicious days and days that actually you better just don't do too much today because it's not quite. So those days and numbers, do they also work with astrology? Do you also work with the planets?
Actually, the animal signs, they are a planetary alignment. It's, most people think of it as a tiger or a dragon or a snake, but there's a lot more to it. I don't know how much you know about the animal signs, but there's also a yin and yang element associated with each animal sign. And it literally just translates to a time-space coordinate, really, with the planets, kind of a snapshot into the day you were born. And so some of them, I'm not too familiar with Western astrology, but some of them are like virtual planets and some of them are literal planets and stuff like that. So,
Mm.
and that I don't know which translates to which. I just know that I do the Chinese astrology and I know how to read it.
Right.
Yeah.
How it's done?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Which ones I would have to leave to some of the masters who wrote the books.
Well, so this book, it's
Yeah.
the I Ching, isn't it? You're talking about. So it's quite a thick book.
Yeah, that's true.
And it does take a little bit of time and patience to actually read through it. But it's so fascinating the way that everything interlinked with each other.
Hmm.
I think that's what so fascinating about Feng Shui. You can't do one thing without doing something else. So this will affect that. And that's kind of the power of Feng Shui, isn't it?
Yes. And you talked about, dates, and you talked about the cycles and stuff like that. And that is another thing I do suggest to people, especially like going back to work. I know around like the Lunar New Year, definitely the Asian cultures have certain days where they take off and then they go back to work. But
Mm.
they usually pick a good day, and that's based on the Tongshu Chinese Almanac. And I do date selection based off of that. But one thing I do suggest if people start going back to work, I mean, that would probably be a little bit more involved process of looking, but there are actual days you can start that support that kind of energy and going back to work. So yeah, picking a good day is definitely helpful also.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I've worked with the moon, not just the days themselves, but the moons are very powerful as well on there. So, when you want to
Yes.
start something new, you'd go for a new moon. And when you want to party and celebrate, you'll probably go for a full moon kind of a period to look at best days or launching something or celebrating something. They're good days as well. They're good. How does it affect I mean, Feng Shui, it's all about energy, isn't it? It's all that
Mhm.
Qi energy. And how does it affect us and our state, really? Why? Why doesn't the environment affect our state?
Oh, our environment does. It really does. Yeah. There's that trinity within feng shui. It's heaven, earth, and man. And I mean, the earth is literally the feng shui and the environment. And
Mm.
that's just, it's not just our home environment, but even what's around us, our natural features around us. And, that's really where, feng shui came from, really, is those natural features and building, to the environment and tapping into those chi spots. So for
Mm.
sure, our environment affects us, and even the way our house is set up and the way we use our space, definitely. Mhm.
Yeah, so even where the houses are built. So I think one of the conversation we had on Clubhouse was about the land themselves, and if your house may be built on top of an old cemetery,
Hmm.
and you don't know about this, there may be some surprises that you may be finding out at some point or another, which makes it really really tricky.
It does. Yeah. Sometimes we don't know everything about the land. That's true. Yeah, that's very true.
How do you work? When we're looking at a space from the outside, for example, in garden, can you feng shui the gardens as well?
I think there is people that do the feng shui gardens. I know with classical feng shui, it's more about your orientation in relation to like mountains and water.
Hmm.
And and I think BTB, I think does the same thing where it's, higher on one side, lower on the other side. And, kind of that, what's it called? That dragon embrace is of course ideal. I mean, I don't have it, but it can be seen with other buildings, other homes around you. I believe can be taken into account too. But the garden, yeah, I think that's more of a Japanese concept of a garden. But I've heard other feng shui practitioners say they've done gardens, but it's just not something I've really looked into. I'd be
Maybe just
interested to
putting
learn more.
a few crystals and a few big old plant pots and things like that, just to keep us safe from the outside, really,
Yeah,
outside
yeah,
in.
yeah,
It's always
yes.
interesting to take a look. And so just tell us, Candice, what it is. I mean, do you have a mastermind group, or do you have a course, or do you have something that you're doing that people could come and learn more from you, and tell us a little bit about what you've got going on.
Well, you go to my website at fengshuibycandice.com, but I think one thing I don't really have listed there is I'm trying to create a course on date selection. So I have a group going right now. And I'm trying to work out on which platform is kind of the best. Right now, I think I'm leaning more towards Facebook groups because it's been through my website, but on date selection and really date selection for me, it was kind of that missing piece with feng shui because I felt like sometimes I would do feng shui, I would implement something, and I felt like sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And I feel like when I started using date selection, I was able to pinpoint dates where I could, you know, maybe trigger some different energies. And to me, it's been much more effective. It's been much more effective. So I always tell people, no matter what kind of feng shui you practice, you can definitely implement date selection. And so you could get a hold of me on that. So whatever, are you going to put this on? It's going to be on IGTV?
So I'm going to put it underneath. I've put underneath the video. I will put the link of
Okay.
your website so people can go on it. And yes, but you are on all social media platform as well, aren't you?
Yes, yes. And then my podcast, Learn Feng Shui, which is just a short podcast that I do about classical feng shui and implement sometimes on Fridays. I have a little folklore Friday. And I think that's fun because I kind of address some different superstitions and myths and really just some fun tales. So they can also find me at Learn Feng Shui or Learn Feng Shui Now, I think, on Instagram. So, and Learn Feng Shui podcast.
Excellent. Well, tell us a story, so then tell us, tell us one of your story. What's one of the biggest superstitions that you've heard?
So I always address, and I know a lot of people do use them, is the little tabletop fountains. I wish I had one handy. So I think about water. One of my favorite things to tell people is about feng shui is that, I mean, even the name, again, feng shui literally comes from the saying, it's wind and water.
Yes.
But a lot of people, I think, don't realize that it actually comes from a book or a poem from Guo Pu, which is the burial book. It's one of the first feng shui texts where he talks about orienting yourself in the land.
Mm-hmm.
And the saying goes that chi is dispersed by the wind and it gathers at the boundaries of water. And that's why water is really used for feng shui, and to hold that water. But with classical feng shui, I always tell people, you really need a large amount of water to hold that qi in. But it really is one of the best activators and ways to collect and hold qi in areas, to put like a water fountain or a fish tank or something like that. But I always tell people use a big amount of water. So is what I tell people.
Yes, bring on loads of water.
Yeah.
Big
Yes.
or big photos as well of a big water. Maybe not a lake, depending on what you want to do with your life. If it's a career one, you may want to have a little bit of energy into that water, but not too much, not torrential.
Yeah,
Of
yeah, for
water.
sure. Yeah, you want a nice sentimental water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Oh, well, it's fantastic. It's something else you talked about just before we go. You talked about the positioning of the desk and the way we sit. So could you just elaborate a little bit? What would be the best tips that you'd mention in terms of getting that best position?
So I always tell people, you do want to start with what is called forms, because again, feng shui is literally the way, a space appears. It's part of that category of physiognomy in feng shui, and it's feng shui. And so literally you want to be sitting in a good position with your back towards a solid wall. It helps you feel supported. It helps them support. And I've heard it also, you know, um, helps with those back problems. So if you have back problems, you don't want to sit with your back towards a open space. And that's kind of just also a psychological thing. You don't want someone sneaking up and surprising you. And so I always say sit with your back to a solid wall. And then again, with the sloped roof, the beams, things that oppress the chi flow over your head, you want to avoid putting your desk underneath the space like that too. So
Mm.
those are my two biggest tips.
Excellent. I love it. Well, thank you so much for all your tips. And yes, so we'll put the link anyway of your website right underneath, and follow Candice on Instagram. Always some fantastic videos and tips. And, it's just there is so much content. So just, go and learn more about it. It's absolutely fabulous. You will see how much your life gets transformed when you really kind of get into that Feng Shui journey.
For
Well,
sure,
that's all for
yes.
now. Thank you very much. Thanks, Candice. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.